We usually think of art as a form of expression, something we make so the world can see what we feel. But art is much more than that. And in some cases, it can become a survival tool. When the inner world starts to collapse, art stops being just beauty and becomes a tool for mental health. I'm Shannon Sani, and today we're going to explore why creating on a canvas can literally become an effective way to calm the mind, work through trauma, and even rebuild the self. To understand why art heals, we first have to understand what it does to the brain. There is a brain circuit called the default mode network, or the DMN. The part of the brain that becomes active when we are on autopilot. It is deeply tied to rumination, to those negative or intrusive thoughts that keep looping in the mind. In cases of anxiety, stress, OCD, and even pain, the DMN becomes overactive. Science has shown that art, especially drawing or writing, can quiet that network. When we focus on a shape or a color, we force the brain out of that loop of thought and back into the present moment, calming anxiety, stress, and even the perception of pain. Art can also influence brain plasticity. Creating something new pushes the brain to form new synaptic connections, which means certain areas of the brain begin to reorganize. Painting also supports a process of externalization. In trauma, for example, the area responsible for speech often becomes blocked. That is why people with PTSD often cannot fully say what they feel. Art, by using visual and kinesthetic processing, allows the brain to express traumatic memory without needing words. There is also something known as the principle of symmetry. The human brain is wired to look for order. Creating symmetrical or geometric artistic structures, such as mandalas or architectural designs, activates the prefrontal cortex and helps organize chaotic thoughts. Looking at or creating natural fractals, patterns with a dimension between 1.3 and 1.5, can reduce stress by 60% almost immediately. The brain recognizes that kind of order and lowers its guard. Visual art also affects the reward system. The simple act of finishing a piece, no matter how small, releases dopamine. This is especially important in depression, where the reward system is often underactive. Historically, great artists did not paint for pleasure, but out of necessity. Instead of using images as decoration, they used them as tools to rebuild themselves. The canvas was not just a mirror, it was also a workshop. Frida Kahlo is a clear example. When she painted her broken spine, she engaged in an act of objectification. She turned pain, something subjective and overwhelming, into something physical and external that she could observe, study, and ultimately dominate. The canvas stopped being just a means of expression and became a witness to her resilience. Yayoi Kusama used art for externalization. She did not run from her visual hallucinations. She took them out of her head and put them on the wall. By repeating dots, nets, and patterns until they covered entire rooms, she turned an internal threat into something visible and concrete, something she could control. But art does not live only in the painting. It also lives in the spaces we inhabit. This is where neuroarchitecture comes in. Art is environment. It studies how certain spatial decisions influence our perception, our attention, and our emotional state. Throughout history, healing spaces have been designed around geometry and symbolism, and it is no coincidence that modern hospitals include art. According to studies from Texas A&M University, spaces designed with natural materials and overhead daylight can reduce blood pressure and speed up post-surgical recovery by 15 to 20%. It is also believed that design based on the golden ratio can create a subconscious sense of calm. The theory is based on the same principle of symmetry we mentioned earlier. Designs built on harmonious proportions like this one allow the visual cortex to process information with minimal effort. When a space is easy for the brain to read, the stress response drops and the parasympathetic system, the one that takes over during states of relaxation, begins to lead. Neuroarchitecture also takes the geometry of space into account. It has been observed that right angles activate the brain's fear center because they can be processed as possible threats. Curved edges, by contrast, are perceived as safe and welcoming, and in experimental studies, they have been linked to lower heart rate and better creative performance. This does not mean every curve is calming or every angle is threatening, but it does mean that the shape of a space changes the body's emotional response. Height matters too. Research in neuroarchitecture, along with recent studies in virtual reality, has found a connection between the height of a space and the way the mind processes it. High ceilings encourage a sense of openness, freer and more abstract thinking and creativity, while lower ceilings support concentration, detail and introspection. So we can conclude that the visual art we observe or create does more than show who we are. It helps improve our mental health and our overall state of mind. It helps us take something from within and make it manageable. It allows us to look from the outside at what once felt like chaos within and turn that chaos into composition. And that too is healing. You may not always be able to erase what hurts or what unsettles you, but through art, you can build yourself a frame where your emotions can move without taking control away from you. And you do not need to paint like Frida Kahlo. You do not need to build an installation like Kusama. And you do not need to understand art theory to use images as a tool to calm your inner chaos. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, create a structure, draw a repeating pattern, organize a space, or simply spend time looking at forms that give the brain a sense of harmony. Because sometimes healing is a matter of design. And if you want to keep exploring together how art can transform our lives, subscribe to BFF Creative Lab